I declare open this public hearing of the Joint Standing Committee on Migration for the inquiry into the value of skilled migration to Australia on the Gold Coast. I welcome all the witnesses appearing before the committee today, as well as members of the public and media, whether they be in the room or watching online or listening online. This is the 8th public hearing for the inquiry. The committee has conducted public hearings in Canberra, Adelaide, Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane, and anticipates holding additional hearings in the coming months. The inquiry is to do with skilled migration. So the parameters of the inquiry are to look at how we're conducting skilled migration, where the issues are, what we can do better, what we can change. Our job here as a committee is to come up with recommendations that will be put to the Minister. Then it's up to the Minister what happens with those recommendations. So the parameters are skilled migration, where the needs are, whether we've got too much skilled migration, whether we haven't got enough skilled migration, and where we could be doing it better and where changes could be made. But in accordance with the committee's resolution of the 31st of July 2025, the audio of this hearing will be broadcast on the Parliament's website, and the proof and official transcripts of the proceedings will be published on the Parliament's website. Those present are advised that filming and recording by the media is permitted during the hearing. However, we ask that members of the media present or listening report the committee's proceedings fairly and accurately. That takes us to item number 1. And I now welcome Ms Keenan from the Gold Coast Regional Jobs Committee to give evidence today. For the Hansard record, would you please state your name and capacity in which you appear before the committee?
My name is Robin Keenan and I'm the chairperson for the Regional Jobs Committee, Gold Coast.
Thank you. Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, this hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter, may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. I'll now invite you to make a short opening statement of no more than 5 minutes before we proceed to a open discussion and a Q&A. Over to you, Ms Keenan.
Okay, so thank you for the opportunity. I'm representing the Gold Coast regional area in this hearing. So a couple of the key points that I'd like to make is we recognise that the ongoing economic and social value that skilled migration has to our particular region. So I'm sure there's a lot of data floating around on what that is. So there are some challenges with the skilled migration system as it is, and I'm speaking more from an employer perspective. So the current migration settings and future needs, I guess what the challenges are is that we just need to recognise that while there is a skilled migration process in place, and it's pretty well been in that manner for quite some time, some of the key challenges that employers face is probably what I want to really talk about today. So in terms of the skilled migration targets, I think we need to see an increase in a couple of areas. I represent the boating industry as part of our committee, also the health industry, and we've also got several other, but I also noted on the website that a few of them have already put in a paper, so I won't talk to some of those industry sectors that we've got on our committee. So, but what I would like to talk about is the increase in the targets to the health sector. So, skilled migration is predominantly around the higher level skills, not the lower level skills, and that's the area that I think we see more of a majority of the need to. The guys from the boating section, so these are the Boating Industry Association, they've highlighted some of the needs in their sector, and they're predominantly trades. So trades normally come with a qualification that is, probably 2-3 year lead time in those. Whereas some of the health jobs, when we're looking at assistance in nursing, so anything to do with aged care, disability, they're shorter qualifications and shorter lead time to get the training and the skills required. So that doesn't quite often fit the skilled migration model that we've got. Now, I recognise that we've got the DARMA and the labour agreement models, so recognise that they're there, but they also come with certain challenges as well from an employer point of view. So I'll round back to that. So the other key point that I wanted to make here is about the recognition of skills that come into Australia. So there's systems set up on state levels as well as federal levels to recognise those skills, but the lead time in that is, in my opinion, too long. So the amount of time it takes for the skills to be recognised and I'm not sure the processes that sit behind that. With my training background, I can only assume that it's an assessment of validating from what's happened overseas versus our qualifications here in Australia. So I'm assuming it's that matching, and how does that match? I'm not sure whether an Australian qualification is recognised as equal and equivalent and handed to people, migrants that come in. But if that is, I can understand where the long lead time is, and I really don't think that that's necessary because not a lot of employers need that. So where jobs are mandatory qualifications, obviously that's essential. Where it's not mandatory qualifications, then maybe that could be streamlined a little bit. So that's recognising, but then you've got the skills gap. So I understand that there's qualifications from overseas that come into Australia that will have a gap. And then it's about the upskilling of those people and that particular gap. So how does that happen? And then the cost impost on that. So normally the person who's coming into Australia has to pay that gap fee if there is gap training. But once again, this isn't a cost impost to the employer because that's, I guess, what they're saying and seeing is there's too much cost for them. So recognising that the upskilling process and what that looks like and how that can effectively happen. So I think that there's some work that could be done around there. So I think I've gone straight into an opening into solutions, haven't I? Sorry. I also like being efficient, so. Okay, so then the other thing is around the settlement services. So I work with a couple of migrant organisations on the Gold Coast and we provide training support into them. So they're resettling of migrants and I'm pretty sure they're...
Training of settlement, did you say?
Training skills for employment, but the migrant organisation is providing settlement services. So I work quite closely with them and I know that they're speaking at 12 o'clock, so I won't take any of their issues. But what I do recognise in the migrant coming in to resettle into Australia, or particularly the Gold Coast, is about that support services. So there's organisations that are set up for those support services, but when they start to get out regional, when we talk out bush, Queensland, they're starting to be more removed from those settlement services and that support that they need. So one thought that I did have was about and I know it's not an employee assistance program, but a similar process for people who do come in where they might have a helpline. And I spoke to the guys at Thriving Multicultural yesterday, and they said that this system or style doesn't exist. So if it does, we both don't know about it, but some sort of system where they can ring somebody or have some sort of connect line where they can talk to people and talk about the challenges that they're having in terms of either resettlement, or it might be just employer issues, because I guess not all employers are good blokes at the end of the day, so we need to recognise that. So it's about those settlement services and support. Then my other point is going to be, I think we need to be clear and recognise that not all pay conditions in Australia are suitable for migrants wanting to resettle. So I think we need to be very clear around what does that look like for particular job roles that we're trying to fill. So For some job roles, it's amazing. So, you know, it will be of value. But there's some job roles, once again, if I look at an AIN job role, assistant in nursing, so that's your sort of level 3, certificate 3 level, aged care disability, working in aged care homes, doing home support for disability and ageing. If you look at those job roles, the pay scale probably isn't attractive enough. So we've got to understand the pay scales and the working conditions that sometimes fall behind some of those job roles. So how do we recognise that when we bring them in? Which brings me to the labour agreements and those processes of the, what's the other agreement? The DARMA. So there's a cost impost for an employer to put that together as well. So I've spoken to a few employers in the aged care sector, particularly around labour agreements and potentially putting together a DARMA. So the key feedback seems to be pretty consistent over the last few years around the length of time that it takes to get that into play. The cost that it costs to get that into play, all the conditions that they have to adhere to for those. And I'm not saying that we should dumb down the conditions, but what I'm trying to highlight is that it's a very long lead time and it's a costly lead time for an employer to get an employee that potentially they might not like. So, and when I say like, it's not about, you know, don't like the way they look or the way they talk. It's potentially that they're not a fit, either culturally for the organisation or even potentially for the job role is what that one's about. So I guess if I could label it, I'd call it how you can do red tape reduction on that whole process to make it more streamlined and more cost effective for the employer. So the Boating Industry Association has also made a point here around the fees. So I'm not sure if they've presented a paper around their stuff, but they're talking about what are the actual the fees that are attributed to some of the migration for them. So then with the guys from the Boating Industry Association, they're talking around technical trade kind of job roles where they're talking about builders, marine mechanics. So they're longer training time to get people into that, to bring them into Australia. And then once again, they also talk quite clearly around the recognition of those skills and the time it takes for that to happen. And then there's a cost impost for employers, once again, to go through that process. Also, the other point was around migration policy. I guess we just need to recognise the fact that housing and infrastructure that sits behind that. So, you know, what's the balancing act? And I guess if I put it into a Queensland perspective, we've got the Olympic Games coming up soon. We're already in a bit of a housing crisis. We're trying to get construction workers into the region to set up for that. And then we're looking at skilled migration. And so there's that component that needs to be considered around the infrastructure that these regions have or don't have, but particularly around the housing. I think that's my...
I think we might, if you haven't given us some information that you have there, we might thrash it out in the Q&A as well. You can raise it. But thank you very much. Very comprehensive presentation. With, in fact, I had 3 or 4 questions and you've answered them in your presentation. But one of the things that I'm really interested in is the labour agreements and DARMA, the cost and timing of these conditions, the length of time. Are there any particular industries where you can give us an example of the time frame? And I can understand how frustrating it would be for an employer to have a position there, business contracts, etc., waiting to be delivered, and being frustrated by wanting to get through the time frame that it takes to get all the paperwork and the cost that's associated with it. So would you like, I don't know if you've got any examples, just walk us through perhaps a time frame of a DARMA.
That particular example, I was talking to an employer that is just outside of Lismore. So Lismore is in New South Wales, Northern Rivers, remote area. And they were talking anything up to 12 plus months, and they gave up.
Yep.
So there never was a start, end time and an outcome in terms of a good outcome, bad outcome. They just gave up. It was easier to try and work with the local market and how they can be more flexible in especially a more remote region than the Gold Coast.
And is it do you think it's a backlog of work that the department has, or is there actual issues with the applications in terms of being too bureaucratic, wanting a whole range of things, and once you go back with some paperwork, they then ask for something else? Or is it just a backlog? I mean, once you have all your paperwork in, is it just a simple wait time?
No, so it's leading up to getting to the full written labour agreement. In one of my past lives, I worked in tourism, and we had a similar thing. So we had a templated labour agreement that tourism operators could use that should meet the compliance requirements and what's needed. But then once the employer got to the point of trying to use that labour agreement, there was just a constant back and forward of, can you provide this, can you provide that? A lot of employers tend to then use some sort of consultant, and I don't know whether that adds a extra layer of complexity around it. I'm not implying that consultants are trying to earn more money by pushing the timeframes out or whatever, but it does get to a complex situation where they just literally give up. And my example in Lismore with the aged care provider, they were getting some sort of support to help them with their labour agreement, and it just got to the point where, they just weren't seeing value.
So you would advocate for a quicker, streamlined process that gives you a shorter time frame to get the yay or nay, and a less bureaucratic, streamlined.
Correct.
Yeah, would go a long way.
Yeah.
My other question, one last one, and then I'll hand over to my colleagues who are here. Just give us a bit of a brief of the purpose of the Gold Coast Regional Jobs Committee. So, what sort of services do you provide to your members?
Okay, so we're funded by the Queensland Government, so the Department of Education and Training, to look at what the skills and labour needs are of the Gold Coast specifically, and then to work out where the skill shortages will be, and then what sort of workforce planning activities we can do to build that, particularly towards the Olympic Games coming up, and making sure that we've got the labour that we need. So that's a primary focus. Yep. So in that, we've got several representatives from several industries. We've got boating, construction, health, manufacturing, hospitality, hospitality/tourism, and there's probably another couple of industries that sit on that committee that provide that information back into myself and the project manager.
Just going back to tourism, and I think we've got some people coming in from tourism today, not too sure, but just something that I've noticed up here when I'm sort of either going for a cup of coffee or everyone is from somewhere else. They're migrant workers. Last night we had dinner at a little restaurant here, and the woman was from Norway. And last time I was up here, the same thing. So how reliant is the tourism industry, especially the hospitality industry, on backpackers and not backpackers, but working holiday?
Yeah, working holiday visa people are a key source across all of the tourism hotspots. So you look at Whitsunday, same deal, Gold Coast, same deal, and Gold Coast has probably built its workforce around that. Yeah. Thank you.
I'll hand over to my Deputy Chair, who can introduce themselves as well. Remiss of me not to introduce my committee members, so I'll allow them to.
No problem. I'm Leon Rebella. I'm the federal member for McPherson on the southern Gold Coast, and I'm also the Deputy Chair of this committee. I have a few questions. The first one, so I'm interested in the shortages on the Gold Coast that can't realistically be filled from the onshore workforce. Now, you've spoken about health, the boating sectors, and through the last response, hospitality, tourism. Are there any others that are reliant on that migrant workforce?
I wouldn't call it reliant on the migrant workforce, but construction also have vacancies, large amount of vacancies as well. So, and manufacturing has its own challenges. So, they're what I call the trades. So the trade sector is a longer lead time to hospitality and AIN kind of work, which is a shorter lead time to get someone skilled up for the job role.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Direction 119 that was recently implemented by the Minister?
No.
No. So Direction 105, which was in previously, gave regional employer-sponsored applications the highest processing priority. Direction 119 no longer gives regional employers a separate priority. Based on that explanation, I'm interested in what impact that will have on Gold Coast businesses.
I don't know.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. We can move to the next question. You spoke about housing and infrastructure and the fact that it's a balancing act. I'm interested in, you mentioned we need to get the housing sorted first as well when we're talking about migration. I'm interested in your view of the sequencing of that. So, yes, there are some sectors that do require migrant workers. I'm interested in your view about how important that planning work is to make sure we have the houses, to make sure we have the infrastructure prior to being able to get in a lot of these people to support.
Look, it's highly essential. Anyone wishing to relocate into Australia/Gold Coast, they need housing. That's the first thing that they need. That's your essential need there. In terms of building for the workforce for the future and us looking after the Olympic Games, to me that's a FIFO solution.
Yeah.
You know, just because they're construction workers, can you fly them in, fly them out? Can you dido them in and out? Yeah, absolutely. Have you got accommodation here for them? No. Can you build a village short term? Yes. They're all solutions. But when we're looking at our migrant workers, it needs to be more of a solid solution. They need to have somewhere that they can go, and it needs to be affordable, because once again, that brings me to my point around particular job roles that have lower income. And then you've got, you know, a 1-2 bedroom flat or unit or whatever you want to kind of call it, maybe sitting at $800 a week.
Yeah. And do you think at the moment, as it currently stands, do you think we are at a situation where the infrastructure and the housing is matching the ability for us to house and accommodate the migrant workforce, or are we in a catch-up phase at the moment?
Look, I'm probably not the best person to speak about that,
Okay.
so I won't.
Yeah. Okay, and then are you aware of any of the reforms that have been coming in federally in relation to migration?
To migration? No.
No, okay. I think that's all
Thank you.
for me.
Mr. Caldwell.
Thanks. Ms Cannon, I'm Cameron Caldwell. I'm the federal member for Fadden at the northern end of the Gold Coast. Just as a broad sort of synopsis, do you feel like the migration system is working for the industries that you represent?
No.
No? And can you just elaborate on why you think it's not working?
If I can speak quite freely.
Yeah.
The majority of the job roles that we actually need are lower level skilled roles, and the migration program is set up for higher level skilled roles. So there's a mismatch there already. I'm not saying we don't need them. You know, we still need all of those university degree qualified people to come in and do job roles 100%, and I'm sure those industry sectors will speak to that. When you look at what I call lower level job roles, so something that would equate to a Certificate 2, Certificate 3 job role, no, it doesn't match. And that's the higher need. So even if you look at health as an example, they talk about nurses, they talk about assistant in nursing, AINs. Your nursing is a degree, degree in nursing. which you can get from overseas qualifications, all that kind of stuff. But then when you look at the AIN, that's not there. Then you have your nurses, your RNs that want to come over and migrate to Australia. They don't want to do an AIN role because they're qualified at a higher level. So there's a mismatch. And then don't start me on aged care stuff where it's mandatory to have RNs on one shift, every single shift over a 24-hour cycle. Then we don't have enough of them, and then the aged care sector can't pay enough to pay the RNs, so they're all still going to the hospitals anyway. So there's a massive issue there. I don't know what the solution to that one is, I'm sorry.
That's right. That's really helpful, thank you. And obviously particularly in my electorate, we're very cognizant of the marine industry being a significant driver of the local economy and jobs at the Gold Coast Marine Precinct.
Yep.
We heard some evidence yesterday where sort of those, high-level, high-income job migrants, they're not having so much trouble with the housing because they're like earning big bucks.
Yeah.
But this experience of these sort of lower but really important skill sets colliding with a housing market that's really not working for them. Can you just talk us through how you see that playing out at the moment?
Well, look, it's an issue that sits there. Once again, it's probably not my area of expertise to talk about housing and housing affordability and all that kind of stuff.
Have you been getting anecdotal feedback though that it's a deterrent or
100%.
a difficulty? Yeah,
100%. Yeah,
and that's their kind of lived experience of trying to find the job and then housing that's affordable and close by. Yeah,
and I guess that's what leads particular job roles to your working holiday makers if you look at tourism and hospitality, because they're here for a period of time, they're here to work, they're happy to share house, whatever it might be, whereas if you're relocating, potentially with family and whatever, you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it does have a knock-on effect for sure.
Yeah. And so obviously, particularly with those industries that you're focused on, I mean, do you feel like there's a tipping point where just sort of general migration numbers kind of swarm over the top of what we've got here to provide, and we should be a bit more deliberate about how we attract and who we attract?
We need to definitely focus on who and what we attract. I mean, if you look at the unemployment across the Gold Coast and then your youth unemployment, we're probably one of the lowest. So the unemployment rate, it's not as though that's a solution either. We can't say, well, our unemployment rate is high, so we need to get more unemployed employed and get them into the market. That's not a case at the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. I've got a couple of questions as well on a couple of the things that you said where you spoke about the Gold Coast. We have skilled migrants come in at that high end, but the reality is they fill their, the vacant positions that there's a need for as well, but there's a real need for a lower level skills or unskilled.
Yeah.
So such as cleaners,
well, definitely AIN, assistant in nursing. So that's typically you could be.
You still need a skill. You still need your skill requirements and a certificate of some sort.
It's not a mandatory qualification.
Sorry,
it's not a mandatory qualification to become an AIN to get your certificate 3.
Yeah.
You can come.
So you still need your certificate 3 though to actually work here.
No.
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 Okay.
Not as an AIN. You don't. I think there's reforms that's happening in aged care and the disability sector that are leading towards making a certificate 3 mandatory to work in the sector, but at the moment that's not the case.
What other roles are in that lower end?
So you'd look at AIN, you'd look at cleaners,
Yep.
you'd look at in aged care, they're still called AINs, but it's food service.
Unskilled labour.
So
basically.
So typically it's kind of like hospitality, but it's in an aged care centre. So you still need food prep.
Kitchen hands.
Yeah, food suppliers, all that kind of stuff. So they're kind of hospitality skills, I guess, but it's working in aged care. Yeah. So you still got those lower level needs, unskilled, skilled.
Those positions, those lower skills that we just spoke about, whether it be cleaners or AINs, kitchen hands, etc., would you say that the majority are filled by migrants here already who have come here on different types of visas, or are they filled by locals?
From what I've seen, especially Gold Coast, a lot is already filled by migrant workers.
Who have come out on different types of visas.
Not necessarily the AINs, but certainly cleaners, food service people, etc. Yes.
Excellent. And my other question is, currently, do you think that we've got as a nation, we've got a suitable balance between the skilled migration program and the investment in domestic training and education? Are we doing enough? For example, if a boat builder or in the boating industry requires a mechanic, are they also employing apprentices, for example, to fill those gaps in the future instead of relying on overseas trained mechanics?
The short answer is yes. That's a whole different inquiry. So has the investment in skills increased in Australia in the last 10 years? No, it hasn't. Funding hasn't increased. Those kind of supports has not increased. But then you look at the apprenticeship model. So you've got a different kind of youth that we have this day and age. They don't want to do, like 3 years to them is like 100, so to do a 3-year apprenticeship or traineeship, doesn't matter, but sometimes they're 4, depending on the qualification. So for a 3-4 year apprenticeship, it feels like a lifetime. If I look at commercial cookery as an example, that's a 3-year apprenticeship. They're held accountable to 3 years. They're not released before 3 years, even if they're highly skilled and highly intelligent. They can earn more money actually as a dishwasher than as an apprentice.
Or a cleaner.
So, so a lot of apprentices pull out to become, and even in the trades, you look at construction, the boat building guys probably find the same. Typically they're builders as well as manufacturers in boat building. They've got the same issues. They can come and be a labourer for more money than to stay in an apprenticeship. And then you've got people starting apprenticeships later. Apprenticeships were set, I can go on for hours, I don't know how much time you got, but apprenticeships were set up in the days when, 50, 60, 70 years ago, where, you left school at 14. So it made sense to do a 3-year apprenticeship. And sometimes some people did more than 3 years because they just didn't achieve what needed to be. So there's a whole raft of issues that sit there. So I can talk about that for hours and happy to come back. And I suppose it is part of the future going forward to ensure that we train and governments of all persuasions have a responsibility to make sure we do that. Yeah, absolutely. But there needs to be a reform around that apprenticeship model when kids are starting apprenticeships at 18. Is the question, The other question I have is, you spoke about the boating industry. Is there any other niche industries up here that I suppose finding it difficult to obtain? We've spoken a bit about the catering, hospitality catering, where the majority of positions are filled by overseas workers, nursing, aged care. They're the ones that sort of generally across Australia are pretty much the same. But is there any niche industries up here that perhaps we wouldn't think of because of whatever reason it could be specific to this part of the region, this region? Caravanning. Sorry? Caravanning. Caravanning? Yep. Yeah. So caravan manufacturing, pretty well, if you remove the boat and replace it with a caravan, it's exactly the same issues. So you manufacture a caravan the same way you manufacture a boat, slightly different. And I know boat people will yell at me, caravan people will yell at me, but typically, if you look at it, they're both manufacturing. One's manufacturing a caravan, so they've got the same thing because they've got all the details inside of the caravan that need to be built, the outside, etc., etc. So the caravan guys would go, "Good on you, Robin." But yeah, caravanning.
Things that we don't think about, for
Yeah.
example. Yeah. So there's a big caravanning industry up here.
Manufacturing, yes.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Deputy Chair, any further questions?
Just one from me, Chair. I'm interested in the underutilisation, and this came up a bit in our hearings yesterday, the underutilisation of the migrant workforce. From the experience of your members, do you have many who have staff who are here to do a particular job, which is fill a skill shortage, and then, as you suggest, because of the opportunity to earn more, they actually divert what they actually do and they work outside their field of expertise? And do you have any suggestions for how government can address that?
First answer would be yes. I see it with some of the PALM. The people that are on, I don't even know what that acronym means, if I'm honest, but the PALM program. So they come over for particular needs and they want a skill in a different area so they can get out of that job role and move to a different job role. So that's one example I can give you. And the second part, I don't know what the solution to that is. I'm assuming when it comes to the PALM program, from what I've seen, is they're seeing it as a pathway to come here, work, which comes with obligations, so they know that they've got guaranteed housing in a lot of examples out regional area, but then that's not their long-term career prospect, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Caldwell?
No, nothing from me, thank you.
Thank you very much for presenting to us and for your submission. If we just looking for my paperwork, if there's anything else that we may require from, we may be in contact with you again, and vice versa. If there's something else that you feel that you need to feed through, feel free to feed it through to the committee. But thank you, very extensive, very good discussion. I thought we've picked up quite a lot of the nuances of this area and what's happening. But thanks for coming. And as I said, if you've been asked to provide any additional information, please send it through to the Secretariat by Friday, 2nd of October. If there's any, there'll be a transcript sent to you as well of today's evidence, and you'll also have an opportunity to make any corrections to any transcription errors that you may feel have been made. On that note, thank you very much for appearing before us.
No, thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you. We now have the... Yeah, excellent. G'day, how are you? Good. I now welcome Mr Clintworth from the Multicultural Communities Council Gold Coast to give evidence. For the Hansard record, would you please state your name and the capacity in which you appear before the committee?
Certainly. My name is Shane Clintworth. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Multicultural Communities Council Gold Coast.
Thank you very much. I'm Steve Georgianis, Federal Member for Adelaide and South Australia and the Chair of the committee, and I'll allow my colleagues to introduce themselves.
Thanks very much, Chair. Leon Rebello, the Deputy Chair of this committee and the Federal Member for McPherson on the Southern Gold Coast, and I do declare that I have a conflict for this one as I am involved in MCCGC, so my colleague, Mr Caldwell, will take most of the questions.
Cameron Caldwell, I'm the Federal Member for Fadden at the northern end of the Gold Coast.
Thank you. Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, this hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. I'll now invite you to make a short opening statement of no more than 5 minutes before we proceed to a general discussion and Q&A. Over to you, Mr Clintworth.
Thanks, Steve. Look, thank you for the opportunity to appear and present today. I acknowledge the importance of holding a Gold Coast hearing in one of Australia's fastest growing regions and certainly one of the most diverse regions in Australia as well. In terms of MCCGC, we're a not-for-profit organisation that has been delivering services here on the Gold Coast since 1983. We've worked with tens of thousands of people during that time across a range of issues, but predominantly our role is to support refugees and migrants to settle on the Gold Coast and to live good lives. So one of the things that I wanted to emphasise from the get-go was that skilled migration is not only an economic mechanism, it's a community building and service strengthening and nation building strategy. So I think that it's important to see that in context and not in isolation as a standalone program. From MCCGC perspective, we've seen skilled migration through lived experience, the families navigating settlement, workers entering care and community sectors, employers trying to fill critical shortages, and communities benefiting from culturally, linguistic and professional diversity. One of the things that we've recently become aware of is the importance of political leadership in terms of social cohesion for setting both the tone and the environment for migrants to feel welcome and able to participate well in their community. One of the issues that I'd like to raise today is that I don't think Australia's biggest issue isn't in attracting talent. We're very successful in attracting skilled people to Australia and also to the Gold Coast. I think our biggest challenge is what to do after that talent arrives. We need to ask, are we making the most of the talent that is already here? We know from research commissioned by Deloitte Access Economics in 2024 that 44% or 620,000 new arrivals to Australia are either underemployed, unemployed or working well below their skill levels. So the core message from an MCCGC perspective is that skilled migration works best when it's connected to settlement support, affordable housing, transport, skills recognition, employer readiness and community inclusion. And this requires investment at a local level to assist with creating conditions and support that will reduce structural barriers faced by skilled migrants.
Thank you very much. I might kick off with a couple of questions.
Yes.
And just the last point you made about are we making the most of the talent that skilled migrants or migrants bring to our country? How can we make better usage of it? Where are the things that are going wrong and we're not actually getting the benefit? Taking into account certifications, Australian methods, Australian culture as well. You can be one of the best doctors in the world, but if you can't communicate with your patient, I'm not talking about language, our doctors go through a psychologist and psychiatric test just to make sure that they are good communicators before they actually get this certificate. So there are intricate little things that make a big difference. So how can we get better usage of our migrants in the skills that they come here? And is it the uncertainty by some employers to employ a skilled migrant on the skill level that they're at, just because of the uncertainty, differences and nuances, and what can government do to improve that?
Yeah, I think
it's just about 15 questions all in one.
All in one, but you've summed it up well, Steve. Look, I think that probably the top of mind issue is around skills recognition and looking at how the pathways to recognising both skills and experience can be smoothed out. I understand the importance of ensuring that doctors, in the example that you gave, are able to communicate with their clients when they're patients. And I also think that there are ways in which that can be made an easier pathway. One of the courses that we deliver is the Certificate 3 in Individual Support. Most of our clients that come through that program will end up working in either the disability or the aged care space. We run 3 to 4 cohorts a year, and there would be at least half a dozen doctors that go through each of those cohorts who have skills and experience but don't have the money or the know-how to be able to navigate the system and have their skills recognised.
Thank you. And in your submission, there's a bit of talk about your involvement in skilling Queenslanders for Work program. Could you elaborate a bit on that, how it assists migrants in Australia's workforce?
Yeah, I think the skilling program is a really good example of how place-based local courses delivered at a local level achieve really good outcomes for participants. The courses that we offer are in an area that is one of the largest employment and growth areas on the Gold Coast, so the aged care disability space, health, community health area. So I think that being able to offer courses in those areas where there are growth opportunities will provide people often with their first experience of working within an Australian organisation, and it will give them that entry into employment and allow them to go on and continue to build skills and experiences and go on to bigger and brighter futures.
Before I hand over to Mr. Caldwell, I spoke a little bit about perhaps the difference in a whole range of things for employers to perhaps employ them, but at that low level, not at that high level, because of the differences, everything from language to culture to a whole range of things. What can we do to increase industry, public awareness, that understanding of skilled migration and the benefits they bring? And just an example, in my electorate, there's a job agency that specialises in migrants only. Some refugees, but have come over with degrees that had to escape, and they place them in work. Once they break down the barriers gradually, and some of these people have made the best employees that some of these companies have spoken to me and said that just incredible. So there's obviously a barrier there. How do we break that barrier? What can we do as a government to break that barrier?
Yeah, I think that
or all of us together.
Sure, I think it's a collective response. Working with skilled migrants is only half the answer.
Yeah.
The other half is to work with community and employers. I think employers are often underprepared, or they have very specific assumptions or stereotypes about skilled migrants. And I think that there is, in some instances, an erroneous belief that all experience has to be local, and so that places a barrier in front of participants before they even get a foot in the door. So in terms of what can help would be looking at a response at local levels that works with employers to help them build cultural humility, to help them
That's
build...
a good word, cultural humility.
Thank you. To build confidence in their approach, and doing fundamental things like understanding the assumptions about what experience might look like, reviewing their recruitment processes and determining whether local experience is really the only way, to look inside their own organisations and look for examples where they already have employees who have qualifications or language capabilities or cultural knowledge that are being underutilised, and looking at supporting those people and helping them to build pathways that will assist others to enter the workforce well. It really is, I don't think there's a single answer. It really is about more of a willingness to be able to accept a skilled migrant into the workforce and to provide that opportunity and give someone a go.
Thank you. And you've given us a really good phrase there, cultural humility. I like that. Mr. Caldwell.
Thanks, Steve. Chair, I should say. Mr. Clintworth, thanks for your time this morning. Just, you mentioned, there was a couple of things that you mentioned in the opening that were, I think, probably really interesting for the committee. One was relating to the importance of housing and transport to the ability of successful migration. Can you just talk through, are we seeing challenges at the moment with the housing crisis in terms of people's ability to either live close to where work is available or where work is needed to be filled? And can you talk to us about that transport piece as well and around infrastructure generally?
Sure. Yes, accommodation and the crisis in accommodation is an issue for many people, specifically for the communities and the clients that we serve. We see that regularly in that the immediate income that's available for rent is relatively low, or it's extinguished very quickly because of the high rates of rent. So that results in families often living in some of the outer or developing suburbs. Pimpamar is an obvious area. And what we see is that as we're trying to provide support, it could be around English language classes, it could be around acculturation, it could be around health, whatever it happens to be, or running the skilling program. The challenge for those families, often with young families, is to get from Pimpamar to where the services are being delivered. And that may mean relying on public transport or relying on others, both of which take an enormous amount of time. So there'll be instances where we have families who'll be attending some of our work and will have spent 2 to 3 hours commuting in with young children and then doing the course and then having to do the reverse as well. So it has a significant impact on their well-being and the cost to the family in terms of not only their finances but also their capability and their capacity from an emotional well-being perspective.
And then just picking up on that Deloitte report, and I thought it was around 44%, not working to their fullest capability or capacity, or not working to their fullest contribution to the economy would be another way of looking at it. I mean, do you think that's kind of indicative of a system that's broken in terms of getting people to make their best contribution to the economy?
I think it's indicative of a system that is very blunt in the way that it works. I think that having more targeted and focused efforts would help alleviate some of that underutilisation.
And then just finally, I'm not sure if you're across the Direction 117. Have you heard about that?
No.
Okay. Which is a recent ministerial direction that gives priority to onshore visa applications compared to offshore.
Yep.
So I don't know whether, maybe putting aside 117, for example, is there any anecdotal feedback about people who are offshore family members that are not getting sort of priority treatment compared to others that are onshore? Have you heard any anecdotal feedback about that yet?
Not immediately, no.
That's okay. All right. That's all from me. Thanks.
Thank you.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about the Multicultural Communities Gold Coast Ready to Learn program?
Yeah, so we run a series of programs that are established to assist people who haven't been in the workforce or have faced additional challenges to enter the workforce. It's done in a very inclusive and low-key way where people are recognised and respected, provided opportunities to actually learn through practical experience, and we've seen the benefits of that in terms of the participation rate. We have incredibly good participation and conclusion, and people going on to either further study or into employment.
So it's about identifying where their interest skills are, then matching them up with courses, etc.,
and also
where the
looking,
shortages are of work.
Yeah, and it's almost a case management perspective in identifying what are the issues that are limiting someone's opportunities and supporting them through that, whether there are psychosocial issues, whether there are economic issues, it could be transport, there could be language barriers. So it's working with them specifically to ameliorate those issues.
Do you have contact with employers in terms of matching them up?
We do. Probably the largest forum that we have is we run an annual employment expo.
Yeah.
We ran one just recently. We had over 2,000 people through the actual event.
It's a big event.
It was really good and successful in that we were able to create those matches. So we had 60 employers on site that were there with jobs available for people. So it was then about creating those connections.
So, and obviously, do you track them down in the time how they're heading? How after 12 months they're still employed?
That in terms of if they're still receiving services from us, we do. But often our clients will pass through after completing their program.
And in terms of the multicultural communities that exist up here in the Gold Coast. Number one, what attracts them to the Gold Coast? What attracts migrants to the Gold Coast? apart from the beautiful weather and the wonderful city that you've got here?
I think opportunities is one of the biggest things that we hear from people, in that looking at the health community services space is a very high growth area, as is retail and trades, and so people are attracted to where those employment opportunities are. In addition to that, we see a lot of secondary migration as well, so families who might have connection to either community or culture will seek out those communities and cultures or families to relocate to the Gold Coast to be part of that.
And in terms of the multicultural communities settling in this area, would you say it's been a successful settlement over the years? Have they contributed to the community?
Absolutely.
Are they participating in?
I think the Gold Coast is not what you'd expect to be as a multicultural community. I think it has still stained by its image from the 80s and the 90s as the White Shoe Brigade and full of developers, and there might be pockets of those people that are still here, but it's certainly more diverse, and that we see that, and I guess that's the nature of the work that we do, but we see that every day with the people who either receive or provide services with us. We ran our Luminous Festival on the weekend, which was a celebration of culture. We had over 2,500 people at that event at the Hotter Lake, celebrating cultures. We had 12 different ethnic performance groups. We had face painting for children, food trucks, and culminated in a lantern parade around the Hotter Lake. And it was just delightful watching the people participate and experience the different cultural opportunities. Rather than just people wandering through, people were sitting down, they were watching, participating, getting up and dancing. And I think that was just a small example of how far the Gold Coast has come in terms of multiculturalism.
And my last question before I go back to Mr Caldwell, if he's got any questions, is more of a view. In terms of the debate that's been taking place by very few elements within the political spheres at the moment, how's that affected the multicultural community up here? And is it detrimental to attracting skilled migrants to the Gold Coast?
I think it is.
And as I said, I don't want to make an issue. It was just very few voices within those spheres. I think
it's worth noting that it does impact on communities. It's something that people are mindful of, and especially from a safety perspective. And that's unfortunate that has to be one of the first things that people consider when they choose to go out in some of their traditional cultural dresses. Or if there are cultural events that could put people at risk, or even simple things like going to the supermarket in a burqa or wearing a hijab. That often we hear regularly about the derision and the comments that are made at some of the women that experience really horrible feedback from community members.
Thank you. Mr Caldwell?
Nothing further from me.
Is there anything else you'd like to add? If there was one thing that we could do as a government, if you had a magic wand and you could change something, what would it be to make it better for skilled migration, to fill the roles that we require filled, and what would streamline?
I've got a list of 12, so I'm trying to choose one.
I know there's lots of things, but if you had one most important one to you.
Oh, look, I think from a safety perspective, it's looking at ensuring safeguards against exploitation, is really important. Mm-hmm. But if we're looking at how we can utilise skilled migrants in a more effective way, it's not just about the skilled migrants. You have to work with employers and make sure those employers are ready to receive those people who are joining us. That would be the take-home message.
Thank you very much for your contribution today. Thank you for coming in. If there's any further information that you wish to add, please get it through to the Secretariat by the 2nd of October. And if there's anything else that we may require, we may be in contact with you again. You'll be sent a transcript of the evidence, and you'll have an opportunity to request corrections to transcription errors. Once again, thank you for appearing, and the committee will now take a break till 10:30. 10:30. Thank you, Hansard.
Thank you.
We're not Thanks, Vinny. Excellent. All good? I now welcome witnesses from the Langham Gold Coast Hotel and the Waterloo Bay Hotel to give evidence. For the Hansard record, would you please state your names and the capacity in which you appear before the committee?
My name is Damien Stephen. On behalf of the Waterloo Bay Hotel, I'm their General Manager.
And Julia McCaskill, on behalf of the Langham Gold Coast, the Director of People and Culture.
And before we go further, I'm Steve Georgianis, Federal MP for Adelaide and Chair of the Migration Committee, and I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves.
I'm Leon Rebello, the Federal Member for McPherson on the Southern Gold Coast and the Deputy Chair.
Cameron Caldwell, Federal Member for Fadden, northern end of the Gold Coast.
And we also have with us Kathleen McGorry, who is our Committee Secretary, and of course Hansard with us as well. Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, this hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. I'll now invite each organisation to make a very short opening statement of no more than a few minutes before we proceed to a discussion and a informal Q&A.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Mr. Stephen.
I've been in the industry my entire life, essentially. My family owned and operated hotels in Victoria, and we came late to the party of coming to Queensland circa 2000. We should have come much earlier, but my mum preferred me to finish my university degree. I have a fairly unique insight into the challenges that hopefully we're going to discuss today in respect to looking at from a 360 view that staffing is one of my probably top 3 challenges in my industry, to such an extent that it fundamentally changes my view on how I develop my businesses moving forward and where essentially I put my capital expenditure to achieve an outcome that I need to achieve. And I'm looking forward to working with the committee to provide some potential solutions today. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McCaskill.
Yes, so I have been in Australia since 2010. As you will be able to hear from my accent, I am not natural Australian citizen, although I am now. Born in England, raised in South Africa, so probably really good to bring to this committee my experience as well. I am representing the Langham Gold Coast today in terms of the employment and the skilled migration and our requirement and dependency on that, in terms of how we currently are sponsoring individuals and how we're bringing them into our business, the impact that it would have on our business if we were not to have these skilled migrants in our organisation, looking at approximately a 31% dependency on visas at the moment in our workforce. So we'll be happy to answer any questions around that.
Thank you. I might kick off with a couple of questions. Mr. Stephen, the issue that you just raised about skills, etc. What I'm hearing in terms of a lot of the pubs in my electorate, and I'd say it'd be pretty much the same across the nation, is that we have so-called lists of skilled workers that can apply to come in. Or you can apply to bring them in on a different skilled visa. Pubs, there's a shortage from what I'm hearing of cooks or chefs. Now, it's one thing to be a chef and a different thing to be a cook or a kitchen hand, but a lot of the pubs are saying they don't actually need the chef because they do a lot of pub food, your schnitzels, your fish and chips. Yet they still can't find staff, but they can get people from overseas, but they don't qualify because of the skill set. Are you finding that the case here? That's one question. The other one is, what percentage of overseas workers do you rely on in your pub, for example? And I've noticed everywhere I've been up here in the last day, there's obviously migrant workers in cafes and restaurants, etc. And how's that competition in attracting them?
So moving to the first part of your question, depending upon the type of, we operate a number of different hospitality style businesses, and you're correct in the first instance that there is a skill level that's required for whether it's just a commercial cookery versus something a little more high end. Our businesses run the gamut of both. So we have hotel assets that do what I would consider accessible pub grub, And then we also have restaurants where we dry age our steaks and so forth. So the skill set required to get an outcome that the customer would enjoy is a significant disparity. Moving to your second question, in my kitchen, our main kitchen at the Waterloo Bay Hotel, which I'm representing today, excluding my executive chef, 100% of the staff in there are either on pathway visas or are in the process of going through that. We have a combination of Nepalese employees. We have candidates from the Philippines that we've actually flown over, interviewed, and then recruited them back to our businesses. That's the stage we're getting at now. That's the level of competition that we need to enter into to try and recruit the staff that we need to operate our businesses.
Thank you. Ms McCaskill, would you like to add?
Yes, so for us, we obviously need the executive chef because we have a fine dining agreement in place as well, which we are allowed to sponsor under. So we have the executive chef and our hierarchy in terms of the chef de partie, sous chefs, etc. But we are finding it difficult at all levels in the business to actually find the chefs to fill the roles. We recently advertised for a chef de cuisine, and we did engage an agency in China to try and assist us to get someone over. However, we did not proceed with that because of the length it would take for the visa to be approved. So we have gone for a gentleman who is over here already. But we're finding that the length to fill vacancies is a concern in terms of finding that right skill set. I would concur with what Damien said in terms of majority of our kitchen brigade is of non-Australian denomination, mostly Filipino, Nepalese, and we do have some South Americans as well in our mix. And the impact is really high in terms of the cost it's costing us to sponsor individuals over. So from the Langham's perspective, we sponsored 14 people in the course of the last year at a cost of around about $30,000 per person. And we are looking at potentially another 10 to 12 next year that we're going to need to sponsor over. Not necessarily just in the kitchen brigade, but also across the entire business. So it's very costly. We also have to provide accommodation for the individuals when they come over so that they can at least try and source some housing while they're here with the housing crisis also affecting them.
In your opening statement, you said you're reliant 31%
Yes.
of overseas workers. Is that sponsored and overseas workers? Or?
It's both.
Both.
So if you had a look at just the sponsored percentage, that's 12%. But we have a huge reliance on student visas as well for our lower level, and that's probably setting the 20%, the balance of the 20% is our working holidays and student visas.
And when you generally find skilled migrants, do you feel that the required skills are there to meet your requirements?
Yes, they are.
They are. Yeah.
They are. We're finding that there's a real dip in apprentices and internships in the kitchen space. There's not very many people pursuing that as a career at this point in time. So when we're bringing over cooks and chefs, we are trying to bring in apprentices, and we do engage with local schools to bring apprentices in. But there is a shortfall in that space to be able to build that pool of candidates coming through from within Australia.
And if there was one skill set which you're really struggling in, which one would it be?
Across the entire hotel?
Yeah, across your operation.
It's really hard to say because if I look at the spread, it is food and beverage management, so it's hotel management, but it is also the kitchen.
So basically bar staff.
It's operational, yeah. So
and
it's...
Would that be the same for you, Mr. Stephen?
Yes, but also our focus is on kitchen. That's where we've had our big challenges. We have the ability to have a certain layer of management that can support the front of house a little bit more than we can in the kitchen. So the kitchen has been our big challenge.
On that note, I heard someone dial in. Is someone on the line? Identify yourself if you are. I did hear someone dial in, but I'll go to my Deputy Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you both for being here today. I have some questions in relation to working holiday makers. So could you just clarify approximately how many working holiday makers you employ and which roles they fill?
Working holiday visas, currently we are sitting on 84. and they predominantly fill our food and beverage attendants, housekeeping attendants, our lower level roles, although we do have 3 who are in team leader roles as well.
Thank you. And Mr. Stephen?
I have 7 for housekeeping, I have 1 for reception, and I have 3 for front of house at just the Waterloo Bay Hotel.
And did either of your businesses or your industry association take part in the government's 2024 Working Holiday Maker review? And what were the big issues that you were, if you did, what were the big issues that came through that?
I don't believe that the Langham did. I wasn't with the Langham at that stage, but I would have found records if I was, so I would have to say that I don't believe they were involved.
And neither.
And since the budget announced the Working Holiday Maker reform, have you been involved in any consultations with the government about it from your experiences?
No.
The other comment question I've got, you mentioned that you provide accommodation, Ms McCaskill, to, I think it's short-term accommodation as soon as people come into Australia, just as a sort of a bridge before they get into the housing market. Could you speak a bit to the ability for you to attract and retain skilled workers in amidst, I guess, the housing crisis and housing affordability?
There has been a lot of candidates that do withdraw the application once they see the price of rentals on the Gold Coast, and then they would rather go to Sydney or Melbourne, where they can attract a higher salary and potentially a lower rental figure. So there has been a few. I wouldn't be able to quantify that in terms of the amount, but what we are finding, so we offer very short-term accommodation. It's normally a month in one of our residences, so they can get over and have the opportunity to find somewhere to stay. A lot of our working holiday visas go into share houses, and it's normally through word of mouth through in the hotel that they find something. But our higher level positions, we do that short-term accommodation. But the pool of candidates is definitely reducing based on the cost of living in the Gold Coast.
And is that something that you think is specific to the Gold Coast? I know you said that a lot of them go to Sydney or Melbourne. Or
yes, if I talk to my counterparts in Melbourne, because we have a Langham in Melbourne and a Langham in Sydney, they do not seem to have the same volume of vacancies that we do. So we currently have 46 vacancies, which we're looking to fill in the Langham. So that's a large amount of vacancies at all levels, whereas theirs is progressively shorter because there is a pool of candidates already existing in Sydney and Melbourne that they can pull from.
And Mr. Stephen, you spoke about, I guess, the lengths you go to in order to get suitable employees. Can you tell me about, do you have a similar program where you house employees when they come here? Are you finding challenges with retaining or getting skilled migrants because of the housing crisis? How does that work?
It's a competitive market to recruit the skilled talent. To that extent, we've actually built boarding houses where we take a longer term view to housing that talent. So we provide a subsidised accommodation for the talent if they come on board. The challenge there is that we're fortunate that we have accommodation premises, but there is a trade-off there that there is an opportunity loss whereby that employee is now going to be staying in that room. However, that is alternatively a competitive advantage to us to be able to recruit and retain the talent. So the retention, which I suspect we might get to at some stage today, that's another really big challenge. So we're just looking to provide the most appealing, attractive environment in all of what that means to the talent.
And just on that, on retention, what do you think is the biggest barrier to retention?
It's a challenging question because if I put my employee or talent hat on, there is an inherent level of unfairness that they are now wedded to me for the next 3 years. Yeah. If I return to my employer perspective, the nature of our industry and the desire for that talent to learn different skill sets within their culinary forte is also something that I don't want to withhold someone to do. We're fortunate, similar to yourself, that we do have from fine dining down to pub dining. So we do have a pathway to describe to our talent when we're going through the recruitment process that, hey, you get the opportunity to do a number of different disciplines within our business. But retention is just an ongoing feature of our engagement with all of our staff. It's not just the the visa applicable staff. It's all of our staff.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Caldwell.
Thank you. Mr. Stegan, I'm sure that in your top three, beer excise probably is somewhere at the top of those.
It's a challenge.
Challenges.
It really is.
But a topic for another day, perhaps.
Yes.
I'm interested in recent government directions which place priority on applications being processed from onshore applicants as opposed to offshore applicants. Do you see that as being a bit of a problem in the way that you've described trying to attract talent from overseas?
Yes.
We'll come to both
Yep.
of them.
Yeah, no,
Yes, so a real world example is that I've got a business that I'm looking after at the moment. I wish to pivot the style of operation of that business fairly quickly away from a pretty ordinary style of operation to something that's going to be very food focused and will be a benefit to that area, the community, and there'll be some significant capital expenditure. My main concern is where am I going to get my key kitchen staff from? So when I'm looking at 4 to 7 months, without even a guarantee that I'm going to get that employee, that is a huge challenge for me. I understand at a high level that on paper it would appear to be more prudent and more efficient to recruit when they're already in Australia. I'm just not seeing that practically in my day to day.
Yeah, I think I've already shared the example where we went over to China to attempt to find someone for our Tang Court, which is a very exclusive skill set, but had to pull back from that based on the fact of how long the process would take for the visa. Our visas take a long time, so we're looking between 9 months to a year to approve when we're applying for internal candidates that are currently in Australia anyway. So it is a really long time, and it's a lot of insecurity for the individual as well during that time in terms of they're on a bridging A or B, but some of them can't go home and see their families, etc. So that's it's a big impact on them as an individual during that time while the visa is processing. But majority of our applicants are actually in Australia that we then move onto a visa.
And just picking up on the housing point, it's super interesting that both of you in different ways have a housing solution that you can offer, which is pretty unique compared to a lot of other businesses. I mean, I take it from that if there was more housing, we would definitely be a more attractive and easy place for migrants to come. Would that be the case?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I used to work at Sofitel Brisbane, and I mean, I couldn't give you the figures because it was a while ago, but it was really easy for us to attract. And we were not sponsored. We were not listed as a sponsor. So we used to just engage individuals who weren't independent, but it was much easier for them to come in and to find accommodation, and it was easier for them to get around in the city as well. Yeah, the Gold Coast definitely, people want to live here, but I think they just actually can't afford or cannot find the housing. We've just employed a hotel manager who's moved up from New South Wales, and he's battling to find something. He's not even on a visa. So it's just generic across the whole of the employment cycle, I think.
And exacerbated those lower level skill set jobs.
Absolutely.
Anything to add to that?
I agree.
Yeah. Okay. That's all from me, Chair.
Thank you. What could the government do to improve domestic training pipelines in the sector? Obviously, it's one thing to source people from overseas, and that's a current need at the moment. Obviously, the long-term view would be to train people here and put them through. I don't think we'll ever be in a position where we won't have to look at immigration. That's always been the history of this nation from inception right through different forms of migration, of course. But I think what can we do to improve that domestic training and have a pipeline of people coming through? Being in the industry, obviously, there's training courses, things that the industry is involved in. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? And what
I'm not finding that the skills development levy that we pay towards when we do immigration, I'm not seeing any, this is going to sound terrible, I do apologise, but I'm not seeing any value back in that. So it gets paid over, but I'm not seeing any programs that are coming out to support in that space, to make it more attractive and to indicate the careers can be different. You don't have to go into your normal administration 9 to 5. There's a variety of careers. And I think it's a little bit about providing the education, but providing the education and almost creating those stories around what's in it for you moving forward if you go into into an apprenticeship or an internship, etc. There probably needs to be some financial incentive as well around individuals going. I think there was one and it was cut. So I think that needs to be uplifted as well, but maybe be more visible with what is on offer.
Currently, there's no one coming through. Is that what you're saying? There's absolutely.
I've got one apprentice in the kitchen at the moment, and normally we used to run with like 6.
Do you, I don't know how the system works, but do you engage with the training?
We engage with
companies?
schools, yes. We engage with literally every single school across the Gold Coast and
do they give you a
TAFEs.
list of their, I don't know, call them graduates or people that have completed the course, or
No, they normally approach us in terms of we have this candidate who's
you'll
interested
tell
in
them what the
pastry.
vacancies are. So you'd give them a
Yes.
list,
And
say,
then
"Here's
they
what
let us
you're the
know."
students that can fill these vacancies.
It's all about the relationship that we have with the schools. So my learning
Just trying
and
to think
development,
how the system works.
So my learning and development manager is in contact with the placement officer at the schools or at the TAFEs, and then they're talking back and forth about the suitable candidates for those particular roles, not only in food and beverage, but administration, etc. But we're finding that the level of apprentices that come through now, Sofitel Brisbane, I would have around about 6 to 8 apprentices easily in the kitchen. And now at the moment, like I say, I've got 1. So the level has definitely dipped.
You're actually after another 5 apprentices
I
right now.
would love to have that. We've got such excellent people at their skill, at their craft, who want to teach. They want to build that next generation, but the next generation is just not there.
Is that the same with you?
I'll pick up on your initial comment, Chair, in relation to our sector is at the moment structurally reliant upon migration, when really the migration should be the backup. Secondly, then moving to the comment about apprenticeships, we engage very much, as a local pub, of course we do, we engage very much at a grassroots level with all of the schools in the area. So we recruit and engage with the schools to allow school-based training. So the process there, to answer your question, Chair, is that they come through, they do upwards of 18 to 24 hours at various times after school in various different areas of our business, whether it's in the kitchen, whether it's front of house, whether it's just being wait staff. And that gives them a non-obligated view of what is our industry like. In the past, my experience, similar to yours, was that I would probably get 15 to 20% of those staff, of those school leavers that express strong interest in working in our business in various different areas. Of that, the majority of them wanted to be chefs.
Chefs. The majority of that 15%.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
that has fundamentally changed. And now what's happening is that I have 1 apprentice where I would love to have 5 or 6 apprentices. We just can't get them, and it's based on the Gold Coast, where I've got some assets down here as well as up in Brisbane. I'm not seeing it. I'm an old man now, so I recall when the apprenticeship process was different. They made it more financially viable for the employer, where there was a change where we used to engage directly with the apprentice and their parents. Yes. Their parents provided a really good support structure at home because they had spoke to me, they'd seen our business, so there was an engagement there. Then we've just put this tier through now where we have TAFE, we have, and that's not suggesting that's bad.
Bunch of layers.
Yeah, I'm just wanted to give you, because you asked the question, some insight into how it did work positively in the past. Now, there's been a lot of changes, of course, since then in sector-wide. But we found that when we were able to personally engage, and the word was indenture the apprentice to us directly, then they went for their day or block release, whatever suited the apprentice to do their schooling. We had excellent outcomes. We talked about retention. The retention was great. But we also understood that the apprentice couldn't be with us forever. They needed to go to different businesses to learn different aspects of their skill. And that was okay, because I knew that I had, like, Barney Rubble's going to go off and go to another business, but then I've got Fred Flintstone's going to come in and take that role as well. So I'd have a tier of first year, second year, third year apprentices, all doing different things, all coming from different businesses and providing a benefit to my business as well as that of the sector. And that was good.
The other question I have, in terms of talking to a lot of the publicans around the place in my electorate, and I know they're very different from the Langham and perhaps the businesses up here, But one of the things I'm hearing is that difficulties in employing people, for example, in the kitchen where they require certain certificates, Cert 3, 2, I'm not sure, and it's made it even harder for them now. Different state regulations, and different states have a mishmash of regulations and bureaucracy just to work as a kitchen hand to assist the cook, I suppose. I'm not sure if Queensland is the same.
I think all jurisdictions have their challenges. We've found, again, we try to be problem identifiers and solvers. So therefore, I engage someone to come and do that. We make sure that if that's the certificate they need, whether you're in the bar and you require an RSA, whether you're in the kitchen and require a Cert 2 or a Cert 3, I like that because it creates, again, another bond between the employer and that potential apprentice or the existing employee who's just a dishy. So therefore, it is worth me spending that time and money to provide the opportunity for the employee to see what his future or her future may look like. So that's probably on the lower level of issues for me. How do you feel about that?
And there are some TAFEs and local communities around here who do offer the Cert 3 and Cert 4, that if they have a certain amount of registrations, they're able to offer the course for free. So we very much support that in terms of getting the individuals on that so that they do have that certification. Looking at sponsorship, though, if they don't have that certification, as long as they have a year demonstrated skills at a supervisory, then we can still look at sponsoring as long as we're able to show evidence that they have had those skills in the past.
Excellent. I think I've got Ms Fernando on the member for Holt online. Is there any questions, Ms Fernando?
Hi, Chair. No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
That's better. Sorry. No questions. Okay. Mr. Reblow.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions. Ms McCaskill, the first one, you spoke about the delays and processing time frames for applications. I'm interested in your assessment. Do you feel that that's getting worse if you go, I guess, where we're at now compared to, say, 2 years ago, or is it something that's remained stagnant, or is it something that's getting better?
At the moment, I think there's an extended. It is extended. We used to get our nominations through with, I would say, 6 to 9 months, and at the moment now, I don't know if you're experiencing the same, it's a 9 to 12, potentially 9 to 12. However, some of them we're waiting for, we think we're going to wait for 9 to 12, and within 3 months we suddenly get it. There doesn't seem to be any clear guidelines in terms of how long it will take at this point in time.
The feedback we've received from other witnesses as well is two things. Firstly, that you lodge your application, you don't hear anything, and there's this silence, and then all of a sudden there's either a delay or you get a result.
Yes.
Is that consistent with your experience?
Yes.
And then the other feedback that we've had as well is that a lot of the time the information that is required for applicants is outdated during the 12-month period, and so the applicants are having to reacquire that information. Is that also a common issue?
Yes, in some instances, yes.
And the second question I had was in relation to the financial burden on business of employing a migrant worker or going through that process. So something that's been raised in front of this committee before has been the SAF levy that is paid to, in effect, the government. Do you see a return from the government into your industry from the payment of those fees?
No, I think I mentioned that earlier, that we pay that over, and I'm not seeing any potential investment in training courses or anything to assist us in that space with the development of the skills that we're short of. I'm not seeing anything in that space.
And that's the same with other sort of outgoings. I mean, you pay superannuation for your employees who are migrant workers, but then when they leave Australia, you've got the departing Australia superannuation payment as well. You don't see the return through the tax coming into your industry. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so where do you think, what would be more useful, I guess, where would you like to see that funding go? What should that look like to assist your industry? Would that be more focused on applications for future migrants, or is it something you'd like to see going into domestic training or elsewhere?
I think it might be a bit of both, because if we don't get the talent wanting to pursue chef as culinary as a career, etc. I think we do need to invest still in that market where we need the individuals that we're drawing from. So I think it needs to be looked at more holistically, as opposed to this one, you will just go back into this pot. I think there needs to be a little bit of divide. In terms of what does that look like, Damien, I'm going off the cuff here, but it's potentially about making sure that there's incentives in place for the domestic market, making sure that the training is visible. And I think it's very silent about what that fund is used for, and I think it's just about making that more well known to the industry in terms of what can you tap in and what can assist.
And so both of you would support, I guess, the quarantining of those funds to be reinvested in your sector specifically?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's really important that some of those funds are invested into more staff to process our applications. Yep. What I've had personal experience on is that there is a level of anxiety with the prospective talent coming across whereby they don't hear anything for a long time. It's essentially they feel like, and they don't understand always the process that we go through, even though we try to be very communicative to it. They feel like they're essentially being ghosted. And then what comes from that is that they feel that we don't care about them. And when I say we, I'm talking about Australia. The challenge we also have, and I've unfortunately had this happen to me personally, is that we're also competing against other jurisdictions, being the UK and Canada, that have a very similar process to what we do, but they do it quicker. And one could argue that, of course, Australia is by far and away the best place people want to go. But when you're waiting 9 to 12 months without understanding if you've got certainty here versus certainty that's going to take the UK perhaps 3 months to make a decision, I just can't compete with that part of it. So therefore that then kicks in my my ability to provide accommodation solutions, workplace culture, things like that. So that's something I think is important.
How often do we actually lose potential employees to other jurisdictions because of these processes?
I've had 3. Yeah.
And I mean, that's you put forward quite a practical suggestion. So with the delays in processing, you think that could be alleviated, or you think it's partly caused due to a lack of sufficient, I guess, people?
They want to come here.
Yeah.
They love it here. So they should. I love it here. But they've got family. They need certainty about their future. I try the best that I can without over-promising to provide that certainty. But again, it's just another challenge we have.
But engaging with the department, do you feel that the reason for those delays is because they're short-staffed? Is that what?
I think it's just the volume.
So it's the volume.
It's the volume.
Yeah. And
so Leon, if I can share with you my journey, I waited 3 years for my visa. Now, I was an independent. I came in on a regional skilled sponsor into Canberra, and I waited 3 years. So that gives you an idea. And I'm a British citizen, but I was living in South Africa, so I couldn't go the British path. So that gives you an idea. This isn't a new thing. This has been going on for ages. And if I hadn't been so committed to coming over here, it would have been very easy for me to turn around and go back to England. I think that just gives you a personal insight into the wait.
Well, I do think that's a practical suggestion then of how those fees could be reinvested to address some of the concerns that you're facing in your sector. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you.
That's all good. I'm fine, thank you.
All good. I've got a couple of questions just before we close it. One is there's been some discussion with other witnesses that have appeared before us in different states, regarding a visa, especially for international companies. And I don't know whether Langham is part of a global chain where staff could come from London, for example, to train or fill positions that are short here, and some of our staff can go elsewhere. And I know hotels already do that. But what are your views on an internation visa for
I think it would be wonderful and very beneficial. You know, we have hotel openings all around the world. We've got hotels opening in Venice and Bangkok shortly, and for us to allow our staff over here to go over and have that opportunity to grow and develop their career, and to then come back and implement what they've learnt over here, I think that would be absolutely fabulous. And especially where in the Langham we have very specialised areas like Tang Court. to have that interchange of skills would be really, really valuable. And I do think as well it would bring individuals over to Australia who have never seen Australia, never experienced Australia, and potentially would then want to make Australia their home. When they go back home and having conversations to actually bring their skills in, I think it would be a very good pathway.
Currently, I know that there is some exchange with some hotels.
Yeah, it's quite
What sort of
lengthy.
visas are they on? How does that work? Do you have to go through the whole
You have
process?
to go through the process, yes. And I think it's a 401 visa where you can bring an individual in within a two to 3 week period, but that's a fixed term and it's linked to a project.
Yeah.
So it's for
So
a very
it's
short
linked to a
period of
project,
time.
yeah.
Yeah.
This is more, for example, talking recently with the National Bank in London, their office, and they were really keen to have people come from Australia to London to their Paris office, etc.
Yes.
Just made it easy to upskill people in some areas where perhaps one nation has better development.
Yes.
Particular, yeah. Would that apply to you, Mr. Stephen?
No, I'd probably prefer something where we had some sort of a ring-fence allocation for hospitality, where we had perhaps, 5,000 permanent visa holders and 5,000 temporary, that we would then be able to absorb that into our needs. So unfortunately, as much as I would like to, I don't own any property in Las Vegas that would benefit from that.
And my very last question, and I've asked this of previous witnesses as well. Currently, there's a bit of a debate taking place, mainly on the fringes of our political atmosphere, to cut numbers and basically stop migration and a whole range of things. And as I've said earlier, very, very few voices that are voicing this. But what would be the detrimental effects to industries like yours if we reduce numbers immensely, as some are advocating at the moment? How would your industries be affected? And that would be across the board.
Be really
There's a
affected.
call for a reduction.
My kitchen would be empty.
Yeah.
My kitchen would be empty, let's be honest. I couldn't serve my customers expeditiously. My cost base would go up significantly, just for labour alone, to try and recruit. It would be, we already have a number of challenges that we face. That would not be one that I could see a workaround on my local level at all. That would be, that would not be great.
Have to explore automotive
Yeah.
options.
And no one wants that. We want staff, we want labour, we want to improve the skill set of all of our employees. So when we go to automation, which is something we must look at, or redesigning our kitchens or our businesses to remove any suggested excess of labour, that's just not good for culture either.
And the Langham, its core focus is luxury, and Langham's philosophy is the luxury is face to face. So the impact would be massive in terms of being able to provide that one-on-one luxury service. As I've shared, 31% dependency on visa holders across a variety of visas in our organisation, be a major impact.
Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for appearing before the committee today. The committee appreciates your evidence that you've given and your submissions. If there's anything further that you wish to provide at any time, feel free to ring through to the Secretariat. And vice versa, if we feel like there's something that perhaps we didn't ask today, we may call you again for some information. You'll be sent a transcript of your evidence, and you'll have an opportunity to request corrections to any transcription errors that you may feel may have been made. Once again, thank you for very valuable information. And I know it's an industry that employs a lot of people, both locally and contributes to our economies and part of our communities, pubs and hotels. So thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Should we ask this to be? Okay, I now welcome Mr. Gerard from Invest Gold Coast to give evidence. For the Hansard record, would you please state your name and the capacity in which you appear before the committee?
Good morning, Committee Chair. My name's Mark Gerard. I'm the CEO of Invest Gold Coast. This is a wholly owned subsidiary of Gold Coast City Council.
Thank you. Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, this hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. Before I invite you to make a short opening statement, my name is Steve Georgianis. I'm the Chair and Federal Member for the seat of Adelaide in South Australia.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Leon Rebello, Federal Member for McPherson on the southern end of the Gold Coast and the Deputy Chair of this committee.
Cameron Caldwell, Federal Member for Fadden at the northern end of the Gold Coast.
And online we have Ms Cassandra Fernando, who is the member for Holt. I think she may have jumped off. And we also have our Secretariat, Kathleen McGurry, who's here with us. I'll now invite you to make a very short opening statement of no more than 5 minutes, and then we'll proceed to a discussion. And if there's something that you don't get in those 5 minutes, we'll discuss them and you can raise them in our discussion. Over to you, Mr Gerard.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. Firstly, thanks for the opportunity to appear before the committee. I'll just start by saying that the Gold Coast doesn't have an unemployment problem. We have a capacity problem. Unemployment here on the Gold Coast is 3.1%. It's the second lowest of Queensland's 19 regions. We have almost 400,000 people in work on the Gold Coast, and we have a $55 billion economy that is supported by the fact that, you know, we're the 6th largest city in Australia. We have one of the fastest growing economies by GRP growth in the country over the last 5 years. We're the second largest local government area in the country behind Brisbane City Council. We're the largest regional non-capital city in Australia. Queensland's delivering a $120 or thereabouts billion capital program, a $56 billion transport pipeline, and the Brisbane 2032 Olympic and Paralympic Games. Construction Skills Queensland forecasts a shortfall of up to 35,000 construction workers by 2027-28. And nationally, we understand we're short 70,000 nurses by 2035. This isn't something that we think we can train our way out of in that time frame. Those workers have to exist by 2028. So for us, skill migration is not a labour market question. It's whether the investment already committed actually gets built. And we've prepared 3 requests for the committee if we're able to ask. They are for a designated area migration agreement specific to the Gold Coast, number 1. Number 2, that the regional skilled migration allocations be restored and that perhaps a dedicated allocation be allocated to the Gold Coast region. And thirdly, that the time between arrival and productive work be resolved so that those migrants that already exist in this country can have their qualifications recognised so those skills can be put to work. And that concludes my opening statement.
Thank you very much. I'll kick off with a couple of questions. You spoke briefly about the 3.1% unemployment rate in the Gold Coast region. Can I just ask, can you describe a bit further the Gold Coast current labour market and how important skilled migration is to the Gold Coast and what future demands, I suppose, does Invest Gold Coast anticipate? So you spoke about 35,000 construction workers, obviously the build up to the Olympics. Where, in your view, where are they going to be sourced from? Not just those 35,000 construction workers, but there'll be electricians, there'll be plumbers, there'll be a whole range of other things, accommodation. Very broad question.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. So, as the committee may be aware, the economy on the Gold Coast has traditionally been about tourism and construction, have been the backbone of the economy on the Gold Coast. However, in the last 15 to 20 years, the economy has changed substantially. We now rely on and are moving towards a much more diversified economy in terms of what supports employment and growth on the Gold Coast. And if I point to a number of industries or areas that are key pillars in our strategy for continuing to diversify the economy, they're industries like film and screen, advanced manufacturing, particularly when it comes to supporting the marine industry in the northern end of the Gold Coast in Coomera, advanced manufacturing, and I could mention companies like PWR, who provide cooling systems for the motorsport industry globally, as well as defence, and companies like Gilmore Space. Those are the industries that are changing the face of the Gold Coast, and they're industries that through industry roundtables we've held recently have told us they're experiencing massive shortages in skilled labour. And if I was to point to one area from recent conversations with the manufacturing industry, is CNC machinists are something that they just cannot get enough of. And so without being able to access contemporary skills in advanced manufacturing, our city just isn't going to be able to continue along that pathway of diversifying our economy that we're on. And in addition to that, we need to be able to provide all of the other, services that we need to. So, all of the support services, in hospitality, in education, in health, we're desperately in need of skilled labour in those areas, and not just to perform the day-to-day functions, but to build the housing that we need to house a massive, a growing population on the Gold Coast, and we can't just build housing on the eastern side of the Gold Coast Highway. We need to build housing on the western side to support those families and workers in the key workers in our economy, so they have attainable housing, affordable housing that they can access. And it's the additional skills, the labour skills that we need in the construction industry to help us do that. And
in your opening statement, you spoke about 3.1% unemployment, the official unemployment on the Gold Coast. If we're able to put all those people in that 3.1% bracket into full-time jobs, let's say the skills were there, everything was there, perfect, would that solve the problem, that 3.1%?
Probably not. I don't think it. No. Short answer is no.
It's good just to make that correlation that even if we did fill every single local person, match them up with a job, there'd still be. So you'd say there'd still be a big gap there.
I think absolutely there will be. Yes.
Thank you, Deputy Chair.
Thank you. I have a few questions. Firstly, a lot of the industries that you've spoken about on the Gold Coast require quite specialist knowledge and specialist skills. I'm not sure if you're aware of the recent Direction 119 that the ministers implemented, but I'm interested in your view as to whether placing most offshore applicants at the lowest priority to come to Australia, whether that's going to actually make it harder to attract specialist staff and the people that you think the Gold Coast needs, especially for the new business investment on the Gold Coast?
I'm not familiar with the directive, but if I just take the concept on its face, I don't think setting the bar as, by the sounds of it, as that low is the right approach. We should be looking to attract the best and brightest, the best skills we can that we need to support the industries that we want to grow and develop here.
And assuming, if you haven't heard of the direction, your organisation wasn't consulted prior to that coming into effect?
No, that's fair to say. So I think we were asked to, or given the opportunity to appear before the committee probably 4 days ago. So it's quick turnaround.
I'm talking about consultation before that ministerial direction, which is separate to the committee.
No.
And then, do you think that our current migration settings are filling the Gold Coast's genuine workforce shortages, or are we as a region accommodating additional population growth whilst those key shortages are still remaining unresolved?
The shortages remain unresolved. I think that is without question from the direct feedback I get from the industry, whether it be in film and screen, in manufacturing, in space and defence, in and the health sector, the hospitality sector. You can observe that on the ground when you go and visit businesses. I think that's pretty clear.
And something that's very important, especially here on the Gold Coast, is making sure we have the community licence for sustainable migration. Just in your view, what are the key measures or the metrics that should determine whether or not migration is sustainable? So, for example, I think you've touched on housing, on infrastructure, rental affordability. Which would you consider to be the key metrics that we should be using to make sure that we maintain that community licence for migration?
I think housing's got to be at the centre of the sustainability of skilled migration, and we can't have one without the other, obviously.
All right, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to hand over.
Mr. Corporal.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to ask about the Dharma concept, and how do you differentiate what that would offer compared to what is currently offered under the migration program that would be available to Gold Coast businesses?
I think if I can just consult my notes for a second, I think it just makes for us a priority. So we carry the regional label, obviously, as a regional area, but we don't have the flexibility that comes with a Dharma and the ability to attract skill levels that the standard programs don't allow us to attract. So that, I think that's what we'd be looking for. The fact that it doesn't require any legislation, it's a deed of agreement. It operates in 2 other regions, and the opportunity to expand it to the Gold Coast, I think would be very welcomed by the business community here, and it makes sense for an area that's growing so quickly, that so desperately needs access to those skills.
And so then, just more broadly, your remit is obviously to bring investment to the Gold Coast. Do you sort of accept the proposition that at some point growth pains, through, say, the housing shortage or transport shortages, whatever it might be, actually then have a tipping point where that shortfall becomes a disincentive to investment?
It's certainly a consideration that's in front of a lot of investors at the moment, is where does my workforce live? And it goes, and to the heart of that is productivity. And what we don't want is, our key workers travelling, commuting, 2-3 hours a day to areas outside of the region to have to come to work and not be as productive as they can be and bring their best to work every single day. We're doing our bit to develop land that is owned by the Gold Coast City Council to take to market, to work with developers to build key worker housing, affordable housing, attainable housing, for the workforce. And it honestly can't come soon enough.
That's probably all from me for the moment. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Yep. You've got another? Yeah.
I've got another question. Just in relation to international students, I was wondering if you could tell me, and we've had this come up throughout the course of this inquiry, but specifically to the Gold Coast, the importance of international students in filling skills shortages. Could you just describe how that works? I know I represent two major universities down the southern end, but there's a few others on the Gold Coast as well. So I'm just interested in the importance of international student numbers for you on the Gold Coast.
My understanding is that they're incredibly important, particularly in the areas like hospitality. The hospitality sector to support where we obviously have skill shortages. I wouldn't say that's an area of expertise for me. How the university sector supports skill shortage. Obviously, in education, visiting academics, play an important role in the tertiary education sector. I don't know if that answers the question.
Just in terms of a couple of specific examples I can think of, say Health and Knowledge Precinct and Yatala Enterprise Area. I mean, where are we at in terms of opportunities for investment that literally the handbrake is we just don't have the skill set? I mean, that biomed stuff, for example, or the Health and Knowledge Precinct, is there a handbrake on that because we just don't have the skills?
I think the answer to that is if we did have an abundance of skills, we would have the deal flow in terms of investment opportunities are there, waiting to deploy the capital. And there's probably a couple of aspects to that. One is costs associated with building the new facilities to house, whether it's the mRNA, vaccine manufacturing facility, or the or the other advanced manufacturing that goes, to medical devices. It's the construction of the physical facilities, where we obviously have shortages on the construction sector because they're too busy building, or concentrated, where they're making money, which is not necessarily on the, commercial buildings or, affordable housing. And then it's access to the academic skills to, support them in, in the functioning or the operational of their research facilities.
So, I mean, the net overseas migration's been around, well, it's probably tracking towards 2 million people over the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, would you, on the basis that there's sort of shortages of maybe construction workers in specific areas, I mean, do you think that net overseas migration needs to be reprioritised into a pathway of greater skills being brought into the country rather than just mass numbers?
Absolutely. We need to be very targeted about who we want, what skill sets we need, and targeted to the areas of the economy that we need to support. So it needs to be, supported by the numbers essentially, and informed by industry.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll just go back to just to thresh out a bit more Mr. Caldwell's question on in terms of productivity in the economy and not having enough workers to fill positions, stifling to the economy, obviously. Is there any particular major projects where or not much major projects that have been put on hold because of not being able to fill positions to get that particular project off the ground? Number one. Number two, and also any expansions. If you've got a business, obviously you want to grow your business continuously, but if you can't find staff, you won't grow your business. You'll stay at the level where you are. Can you just elaborate a bit around that with any sort of evidence that you may have where that is actually happening up here on the Gold Coast?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So there are two examples that I'll speak to. So one is PWR, who are advanced manufacturing for cooling systems for motorsport and defence. I mentioned this earlier that they rely heavily on CNC machinists for the advanced manufacturing aspects of their production line, and they they have a shortage. They cannot access sufficiently skilled, qualified CNC machinists.
So therefore, it's on hold, their project.
It's not on hold. Their ability to to meet their production quotas have been affected by the inability to access those CNC machinists. So they're approaching the European market, I think Wales and the UK, where they can find the equivalent skilled labour to perform those tasks. But that's one example. The other example is access to, or the ability to manufacture the clean rooms in places like Gold Coast Health and Knowledge Precinct for the biomedical research sector. So that's a very skilled, specific skilled, or techniques involved in manufacturing and maintaining those facilities. So my understanding is that the ongoing development of those facilities is limited by the access to that expertise, which I believe is concentrated in a couple of areas around Melbourne. We can't access them locally.
Thank you. Anything further? Mr. Moore?
Thank you.
On that note, thank you very much for appearing before the committee today. If there's any further information you wish to feed through, please feel free to do so by the 2nd of October, and vice versa. If we require anything, we may call on you again. You'll be sent a transcript of your evidence, and you'll have an opportunity to request corrections to transcription errors if you feel there's any that have been made. On that note, thank you very much for your presentation and for your submission. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Committee. Thank you.
Multicultural communities. Come on.
Hi, how you doing? Good to see everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. I now welcome witnesses from thriving multicultural communities to give evidence. For the Hansard record, would you please state your names and the capacity in which you appear before the committee?
Jake Joseph Coates. I'm appearing on behalf of Thriving Multicultural Communities. I am the Community Development Coordinator there.
Ella Histrophovich, part of Thriving Multicultural Communities. I'm the Networking Communications Officer, as well as the SQW Project Coordinator.
Thank you. Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, this hearing is a legal proceeding in the Parliament. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and affects parliamentary privilege. Just before I invite you to make a short opening statement of no more than 5 minutes, I'll just introduce myself, Steve Georgianis. I'm the Chair and the Federal Member for the seat of Adelaide in South Australia. I'll go to my colleagues.
Hello, Leon Rebello, the Federal Member for McPherson on the southern end of the Gold Coast and the Deputy Chair of this committee.
Cameron Caldwell, Member for Fadden at the northern end of the Gold Coast.
And we also have online the Member for Holt, Miss Fernando in Victoria, and Miss Kathleen McGorry, who is the Committee Secretary. Miss Fernando may cut in and out. I'm not sure if she's online right now, but she's not. Okay, she may come in. I'll now invite you to make a short opening statement, as I said, of no more than 5 minutes. Please speak up because we're recording all of this for Hansard's purposes. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the committee for the opportunity to appear today. My experience is primarily at the community level, working with culturally and linguistically diverse communities, including humanitarian entrants. I don't work directly with the skilled migration program, so my comments today are based on what I see within communities after people have arrived in Australia. In relation particularly to the committee's consideration of skills gaps and shortages, I believe there is an opportunity to look not only at the skills Australia needs to bring into the country, but also at the skills and capability already here that are currently underutilised. Through our work, we regularly encounter people who have come to Australia through pathways where their individual occupational skills were not the basis on which they entered the country. This includes humanitarian entrants, the family stream migrants, as well as partners and other secondary applicants who accompanied a primary visa holder. Many of these people bring qualifications, trades and substantial professional or occupational experience of their own. We see people whose previous experience is relevant to the occupations where Australia is experiencing workforce shortages, but whose skills are not being fully utilised. Humanitarian entrants are a particularly important example from my own experience. Their migration pathway reflects the circumstances that brought them to Australia. It does not reflect their previous education, occupation or capability. Humanitarian cohorts are also extremely diverse. Australia has received people from a wide range of backgrounds, including the former Yugoslavia, Sri Lanka, the Middle East, Iran, and more recently Ukraine. Among these communities are people who were professionals, tradespeople, educators, business owners, and skilled workers before coming to Australia. ABS-linked census and migration data gives us some indication of the capability that exists among people whose individual skills were not on the basis on which they entered Australia. Among family stream migrants in the 2021 data, more than a third of men and more than 40% of women held a bachelor level qualification or higher. Among humanitarian stream migrants, roughly 1 in 7 held a bachelor level qualification or higher. I believe both figures are noteworthy because these migration pathways are not primarily designed to select people according to Australia's occupational needs. And formal tertiary qualifications only tell part of the story. These figures don't capture the full range of trade, vocational, business and occupational experience people bring with them. The humanitarian data is also based on the 2021 census and therefore doesn't capture more recent humanitarian cohorts, including arrivals from the Ukraine after 2021. At a community level, we regularly see barriers preventing people from returning to their previous occupations or fully utilising their existing skills. These include English proficiency, recognition of overseas qualifications and experience, difficulty producing documentation, navigating Australian systems, limited professional networks, and difficulty obtaining that first Australian employment opportunity. We also see the consequences of this. People with substantial qualifications and years of experience can end up working in occupations that make little use of their existing capability, while Australia continues to report shortages in skilled occupations. I believe there are some practical opportunities to address this. Firstly, we could become much better at identifying existing skills earlier. For people whose individual skills were not the basis of their migration, we should systematically identify previous occupations, qualifications, trades and significant work experience, and where relevant, compare those capabilities with identified workforce shortages. Secondly, when Australia identifies a critical skills shortage, I believe we should look at the capability already present among people living here before determining how much of that gap needs to be filled from overseas. Thirdly, where someone already has substantial relevant capability, we should identify the actual gap between their existing skills and Australian requirements. I'm not suggesting that the Australian qualification, licensing or professional standards should be lowered. Assessment should remain with the appropriate Australian authorities. But where the gap is occupation-specific English, Australian regulatory knowledge, a particular competency, supervised practice or targeted additional training, I believe we should have clearer pathways to address that gap rather than allowing existing capability to remain unused. Community and settlement organisations can assist with this process. They have trusted relationships within communities and are well placed to identify previous qualifications and occupational experiences, connect people with the appropriate assessment and training systems and support them to navigate those pathways. Their role would not be to assess or certify professional competency. Their role would be to help identify, connect and refer. Skilled migration will continue to be an important part of Australia's workforce needs, and I'm not suggesting this should replace it. Rather, when Australia identifies a critical skills shortage, I believe we should understand both sides of the equation, what relevant capability already exists among people who are here, and what remaining gap genuinely needs to be filled through skilled migration. If we better identify that capacity, assess it appropriately, and provide targeted pathways to address genuine gaps, we can give people already living in Australia a better opportunity to use the skills they bring with them, while also making better use of an existing workforce resource. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I might just kick off with a couple of questions in terms of some of the work that you do, and very good stuff from what I can see and what I've read.
Thank you.
How reluctant are employers to take on migrants? Do you find there's a bit of a reluctance or a bit of a wall to begin with? You could have someone who has very high skills, a degree in engineering or something from overseas, comes here, does the bridging course, certified, but yet the reluctance by the employer side to take someone on. And there's been many studies where it's there.
Yeah, no, definitely.
How do you bring them round? That's what
I believe at the moment that, to answer that question, each workforce has different demands. They want different workers for different things, and a lot of them are undermining the ability of a lot of the migrant workers who bring other skills with them, such as a secondary or third language in a lot of cases. So we find all the time that a lot of them are underutilising their skills. We have a lot of clients that come in that suggest that they're not making it to interviews because of a thing like their surname, the way their resume is written, if they highlight that they did train overseas, and that's after they've already received that recognition of prior learning and spent that money to bridge that gap and to make sure that they're meeting the Australian authority requirement. So it happens. We experience it with clients multiple times a month. To get around that, I believe that we need to have more programs that are putting them into workplaces that are, sorry, I'm going a bit blank. I believe we need to bring them into workplaces and basically give them the training at that minor level to begin with so that they're able to showcase the skills that they have. Does that answer your question?
In terms of awareness, is there any awareness programs that you're aware of for employers to understand the differences in culture, etc., which makes it easier for them? Then the reason I'm raising this is because I've seen a very good program in South Australia where the Multicultural Communities Council goes out to employers, including big banks, etc., and they conduct a small training program of cultural awareness. So some of the intricacies that they may put up barriers all of a sudden are dropped, and they've got a really good program of matching people up with different. So any programs here similar or something along those lines?
There's numerous organisations that run cultural competency training that can be directed towards other employment workplaces. However, it's primarily at the direction of that workplace to take upon that training and that program. I'm not familiar with anyone on the Gold Coast right now that is specifically going into businesses and offering that training for no cost to benefit a business, but I believe there's definitely merit to that idea.
Thank you. Deputy Chair.
Thank you very much, and thank you both for being here. Are you familiar with the Direction 117, which places offshore family visa applicants behind the line in terms of comparable onshore applicants? I'm just interested to understand your views. Do you think that prioritising onshore family visa applicants would make it harder to retain skilled migrants whose family members are still overseas?
As a family man myself, I believe that if you're not with your family, that's always going to impact your ability to create a life in a different country. So I believe that yes. I'm not familiar with the case file that or the case number that you represented, that particular policy, but I do believe that that is a shortcoming.
Yeah, and similar to the previous witnesses, so you said you're not familiar with it, so I assume you haven't been consulted, your organisation hasn't been consulted through the process of that direction?
No, I'm not aware of anyone in the organisation being consulted before.
And can you tell me a little bit about the, I guess, the strategies that you think we could put in place, whether here on the Gold Coast or more broadly, to increase the public awareness and the buy-in in terms of the understanding of skilled migration in Australia?
I believe making the recognition of prior learning and occupation experience recognition easier may help with that. If we have more people from overseas that are having their qualifications measured against the Australian framework successfully, I believe that that's going to highlight that we have these people in the community that have these skills that we do need that can be brought forward, because we encounter a lot of clients that don't have the financial capacity, especially if they're coming on that humanitarian pathway, to be able to afford the RPL pathway. There was a program several years ago that was a pilot project that was offering this for free, and we had many clients take advantage of that. And the majority of them are working in their occupation-specific fields now. But now that that pilot program is no longer around, we're having a lot of them that just don't have the financial capacity to pay for the RPL recognition, or to go back to university or back to a trade school to upskill and qualify to the Australian framework.
And I'm just interested, because you would obviously deal with a lot of people who are new arrivals to Australia. Have they spoken to you about their experiences in terms of the application process, in terms of how long it takes? Have you got any understanding of whether you've seen an increase or whether they have seen an increase in that time recently?
It's very sporadic. It changes depending on the diaspora that's coming. So when we had a lot of the Ukrainian humanitarian entrants coming to Australia, many of them have education that is higher than a bachelor's degree. So they wanted that to be recognised as prior learning. If we have humanitarian entrants from other places, though, their focus may be more on a trade skill, which is different and harder to measure. We're then referring them on to trade schools and generally things like vocational institutions, RTOs, so that they can try to upskill as quickly as possible. When it's the university sort of level of tertiary study, though, it changes depending on who's coming, whether that country has a high emphasis on tertiary education, and then they're also wanting to build that lifestyle similar to what they had prior. So they seem to be very, very motivated to try and make sure that that's happening here in Australia.
And how much of a challenge do you think housing is for new arrivals into Australia?
We have housing issues with people that aren't new to Australia.
Yeah.
We have someone on staff who's working 5 days a week who's just going through realestate.com domain looking for rentals for our clients to be able to apply. Housing is an incredibly complex and huge issue that we're facing here in the Gold Coast.
And in order for Australia, obviously we've got a massive skill shortage at the moment, and especially here on the Gold Coast. In order for Australia to be able to fill that, we, as people have been saying, we do need to make sure we can fill some of that in part from overseas migration. How important do you think it is that we get the housing right before we're able to fill that? Because it's kind of a vicious sort of cycle otherwise. Would you agree?
I definitely agree with that. I believe the housing should be tied to migration numbers, because we're trying to build a workforce in Australia that's capable, and you can't be completely capable if you're worrying about having something over your head and having basic needs. I don't think that we should be bringing anyone into Australia if we don't have anywhere to put them.
And thank you, that's very, very interesting. Can you tell me, when we do bring people in and they don't have access to the housing, what are the challenges that they then face? Do you see them having to leave because of it? Do you see them having to leave the city of the Gold Coast, which means that if they're coming to fill certain skill shortages here, we don't necessarily get the benefit? What are the consequences for not only migrants but the community when we don't get that housing piece right?
We have clients that have 9 people living in 2-bedroom apartments at the moment. There's issues where there's been escalation to violence, because living in that closer proximity to people creates numerous issues, and they can't afford or find anything on the Gold Coast. So we have many clients now that have been with us for years, have been working on the Gold Coast, contributing to the Gold Coast for several years, who are now moving further west or further north.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Nothing from me, thank you.
In terms of, and you spoke a bit about it, the recognition of prior learning overseas and the qualification of skilled migrants who are here living on the Gold Coast, what's a certificate 3 level, for example? Is that suitable for entrance into Australia's workforce, or should it be lowered, made higher?
I would probably say that Certificate 3 is the minimum level for something that has a framework behind it. So things like your individual support, teachers' aids, or programs like that, I believe they need that structure. Anything lower than that, and I don't know whether it really assesses the competency of that person against the framework in Australia. So I believe that the framework is important. And Queensland is quite lucky. I'm not familiar with other states. You might be able to pertain to South Australia, but Queensland has the Skilling Queenslanders for Work program, which does identify in-demand areas for occupation shortages and offers no-cost training to participants if they qualify to upskill at that Certificate 3 level and Certificate 2 level.
Are you finding any similarities anywhere in terms of people who are settling and being employed in the skill set that they have much faster rate and smoother than others? Is there any particular cohort that you could that we can look at and think, you know, here's a good system that's working in a particular industry or in a particular skill set?
I believe that for a lot of our clients that are coming and they're looking for something to upskill into very, very quickly, individual support seems to be something that's quite not simple, but seems to offer a lot of benefit, because as soon as they start studying, from day one, a lot of them are able to get work experience in that field and create a funding stream almost immediately if they're successful at an interview.
So in that support up front makes a big difference.
Yes, a huge difference to their overall outcomes, because they have the financial capability to maintain the study while they're working and continuing.
Are there many that you see here in the region that do come out as skilled migrants but completely, I don't want to use the word fail, but completely just can't get a job after they've been perhaps employed for a very short time? And what happens to those people?
So a lot of them are clients that we deal with, and we try to make sure that we're sustaining their upskilling or filling in the gaps that have led to the possible dismissal or the forfeit of that original opportunity.
Yeah. And how much would you say is in that cohort, in that group, that perhaps for whatever reason can't get employment? How much would you say is the skills side of it, or perhaps the cultural side of it, from both employer and the?
Look, I believe that it's a mix of both, and it changes depending on the cohort. Yeah. If you have some of the skilled migrants that have come from certain countries and regions, a lot of them have other issues that they're dealing with, like settling into Australia.
And that's where the support comes in.
Yeah, some of them may have PTSD if they've been involved in conflicts overseas that they're also trying to navigate while they're trying to build a life here in Australia. So it depends completely. We have quite good outcomes employment-wise after our clients go through the SQW program, generally in the 65% range plus.
Okay. That's pretty good. Thank you. Any further questions? Having no further questions, I thank you for appearing before the committee today. If there's anything else that you wish to feed through, please do so before the 2nd of October. And if there's anything further we may request, we may call upon you again. You'll also be sent a transcript of your evidence, and you'll have an opportunity to request corrections to any transcription errors that you may feel have been made. Once again, thank you for appearing before the committee. Thank you for your submission and for your valuable thoughts. That concludes our hearing program for today. Finally, I'd like to thank all the witnesses who appeared, the committee, my colleagues who were here, the Secretariat for organising it all, and of course for Hansard for broadcasting and keeping a true and accurate record of everything that was said today. I declare the public hearing closed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.